to manage our session and ensure good audio and visual quality, there's a few details we need to point out. Everyone but the presenters will remain muted and cameras will be off. Feel free to introduce yourself. In fact, please do introduce yourself in the chat box and where you're joining from. You can also post your questions there or in the Q&A box, and we will have time for questions and discussion at the end of the presentations. As you may have just heard, the webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on Healthy Aging Core along with the slides in the next few days. And for those who would like the option of closed caption, it has been enabled, so you can get the closed captioning by just pressing the icon on your toolbar. So today's webinar is about intergenerational programs, the intentional connecting of children and youth with older generations through community projects and programs. We'll explore concepts, principles, effective approaches and practices, and relevant resources. And we'll also hear about 3 different intergenerational initiatives from across the country. And we hope that you'll leave the session inspired to learn more about the value of intergenerational connections and the opportunities to develop them, adapt your own programs, or connect with others, such as the ones you'll hear about today. So I'm very pleased to introduce our presenters. Dr. Shannon Jarrett is a professor of social work at The Ohio State University. Her research focuses on intergenerational community building strategies. She's trained as a gerontologist and has studied community-based services, therapeutic programming, and research strategies involving a wide range of youth and older adults possessing diverse strengths and needs, such as chronic disease and disability. Dr. Jarrett collaborates extensively with students, practitioners, and researchers across diverse disciplines. She's contributed to the United Nations, the National Institute for Health, USDA, and international efforts to promote developmental theory, research, and practice. Jules Meyer is a consultant and CEO of FAB Incorporated and the project manager for Grandpals, where she helps realize the strategic vision and expansion of the Grandpals program across Canada. She enables all aspects of the Grandpals national program, from grant management to supporting program sustainability and supporting expansion across the country. She manages the International Advisory Group for the Center of Studies in Aging and Health and is the primary point of contact for inquiries related to the Grandpals program. Betty Good is program and training lead for LINKages Society of Alberta. Betty's been doing intergenerational work with LINKages for the past 8 years and has seen firsthand the magic of intergenerational relationships. She's passionate about training others to develop intergenerational programs in their communities to connect youth and seniors, and she has 40+ years of experience teaching, training, creating, developing, as well as implementing programs. And Sue Carabetta is Manager of Community Engagement and Seniors Programs at North Shore Community Resources in the Greater Vancouver area. She's worked with older adults in long-term care and more recently in stroke recovery, and currently oversees staff and programs for Better at Home, caregiver support, the Seniors One-Stop Navigation Center, and the Community Connectors Social Prescribing Program, Volunteer North Shore, and now also InterGen North Shore. And working with Sue is June Maynard, or I should say volunteering with Sue is June, community champion for InterGenNS. June is a retired early childhood educator who worked in direct childcare, community care facilities licensing, and managing a childcare resource program. She's always had an interest in intergenerational concepts and has seen firsthand the life-changing impacts of such programs. Once retired, June wanted to pursue intergenerational initiatives for the North Shore from a community development perspective, and she assisted in the launch of the InterGenNS project in July of 2019. In the process, she's very cleverly created her own volunteer position and has had a rewarding experience in being a community representative for this project. So thank you all for being with us today, and now I'll turn it over to Dr. Shannon Jarrett to get us started.
Good morning, good afternoon. I have got some Canadian roots. I don't know if I'm the only person joining from the US today. I'm working on getting my screen up. My grandmother lived in Edmonton, Alberta, and so that is my link, and I'm very glad to have been invited by Laura to join you today. Does it look like you've got a title slide in front of you? No, it doesn't. I'm going to try one more time. I thought I was so clever trying this out with the practice earlier. I'm going to get it this time. Okay. Whew. Thanks. I am glad to be here, and I hope that the sequencing of having me speak first with regards to evaluation before you get to hear about these really cool programs that I'm excited to learn about as well, that it's useful, that you can think as you go forward about the ways of knowing that your intergenerational or single generation program works, and to think also about how our colleagues who are presenting this morning are measuring and considering the ways that their program is working and how it might continue to develop to meet the needs in the community. So I've been studying these types of programs for a really long time, and I've got a couple of objectives for you today. I'll be sharing a little bit about why you should be interested in intergenerational program evaluation, and I'll share why and how colleagues and I created this particular tool, which is freely available, and I'll share the link with you in a little bit, the Intergenerational or IG Program Evaluation Tool. And I'm going to walk you through that tool and illustrate some different ways that it might be used, whether you're just getting started with a program or you're thinking about mixing up some of your intergenerational programming and other times that you might find it useful. And so the first thing I'll ask for, and you can feel free to share this in the chat, but I'm going to be mindful of the time, is to ask, how do you feel when you are asked about program evaluation or are tasked with taking on program evaluation at your organization? Some of you might feel like the little girl in the finger paint, that it's a pretty messy job. Some of you might feel like the figure in the upper right-hand corner, that it's like pushing a boulder up a mountain, or like a maze on steep terraced land. It can be really challenging. And I have had all of those feelings thinking about evaluation. So that relates to part of why I have worked to support the creation and the refinement of that intergenerational program evaluation tool. It's really tricky because intergenerational or intergen programs, they just continue to evolve. It's fantastic. The range of goals they can support is really only limited by our imagination. And you just get a hint of some of the types of programs that are supported with intergen strategies in these pictures here. They might include healthy food and nutrition. That was a project that I directed, including through COVID. It might be improving physical activity and mobility and lifelong learning. It could be the use of technology, whether it's young people teaching older tech users or vice versa. And then we see lots of examples of older adults being in the classroom supporting child development and learning. Well, it's pretty hard to think about having one evaluation tool that could meet the needs of all these different programs because they're trying to achieve different things. But at the heart of my values and beliefs, the research I've done all these years, the way that these intergenerational programs achieve these different, fantastically rich goals is through the relationships they build between the young and the older persons. And I have found in my research and in others that those relationships depend very much on some specific practices that the leaders of the programming, the facilitators, your staff members or volunteers, that they take when they're doing the programming. Beyond that, and I'll share some resources on this as well, it's really most important that you align your evaluation efforts with your program goals. And so if your goal is to facilitate positive intergenerational relationships, the scale I'm going to share with you today might work really well by itself. It could tell you if you're doing the things and they're supporting positive interaction among your younger and older participants. If your goal is to improve the percentage of children in a classroom or in a school who are reading at grade level after participating in an InterGen volunteer program, you're probably also going to want measures of reading skills. before the programming begins and at the end of the year, for children who do participate in that program and for people who don't. Sometimes I see that practitioners understand that it's really important to do their evaluations, but they might not have received training on how to do evaluation. They might not have money to pay somebody that does have that experience. And so they do their very best to figure out what's going on. And this is my number one rule for you to take away, is to align those evaluation efforts with what you are aiming to achieve with that InterGen program. And I want to acknowledge that there isn't one best way. That's something else that we see come across to us in some of the literature about evaluation. You've got to have standardized scales, or you've got to have a randomized clinical trial. And you've also got to deal with the parameters and the resources that are available to you. And this is a list of some of the things we see in the InterGen research that make for excellent ways of knowing, excellent research or evaluation findings. You might keep notes or checklists on observations that you make during programming. You might note down during programming a story that tells you something is going on that's really special in a session that you're observing. I just recently finished doing interviews with teen and adult participants who are mentoring each other in 2 different states. Artifacts could be useful. You might use writing that children are doing or that adults are doing, or things that they're creating in poetry or creative arts formats. Surveys are really common, and this year I made the big 21st century leap to getting data on iPads through surveys. And would you believe it? The site said, oh, we're not ready for that yet. We better sit out with pencil and paper. And we had so many challenges with the pencil and paper. By the time we got to the iPads, they were really excited to try it out, and they told us it worked even better. And there are some of you that are doing types of programming where there are reliable, valid, standardized measures that are really important if you want to be able to speak the same language, for example, across healthcare providers or maybe across schools. So I'll share a little bit about this particular scale, and the reason that we created it is largely because of this immense variety. And we thought, again, at the core of how these programs work and why is the relationship. And so we wanted to try and represent the relationship and acknowledge how critical your intergenerational program staff are, the leaders of the programming. We started out by doing observations. Those were really rich. They were also pretty time consuming. We know that staff don't always have that kind of time. We did qualitative interviews with people who were leading these intergenerational activities. And we asked them, what do you think are the most important things that you do to set an activity up for success? And that became reflected in the iPad. And then I was really lucky to have some support to get a lot of data that allowed us to study whether or not activity leaders' specific practices were associated with levels of intergenerational interaction. And we found a number of them that were. And so those were evaluated by experts. This is the Delphi panel, expert practitioners and expert researchers who helped us to finalize this version I'm going to share with you today. This image in the right-hand margin is the cover page of the resource that is freely available. I am going to do my best not to lose my screen sharing and to type into the chat box the link for this instrument. I'm going to be showing you some pictures from this image. So I'm going to ask you, don't run away from me just yet and click on that link and start looking at the pages. But these are actual screenshots of the pages in the Intergenerational Program Evaluation Tool that Generations United and the Eisner Foundation helped to support the creation of. This is what you're going to find on page 13 and 14. If you listen to this presentation and you like what I've shared, this is a print-friendly version, so you could print it out for yourself and use it. I'm going to blow it up only a little bit on the next 2 slides so that you can see each page separately. So let me tell you a little bit about what's in here. I think I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's in here. I'm ready to change slides. My mouse is going to show up. There. So we've just got a dozen items here. I want to make clear this instrument is intended to be completed for a standalone activity. So it's not going to tell you at the end of 6 weeks, if you fill it out just once, how effective your program was. It's intended to be used for a single intergenerational activity. And I'll talk about timing and relation in a couple of minutes. You can see in that top hand part of the screen that it just captures some basic information. What were you doing? How many young people there? How many older adults were there? Who was leading the programming? Where did it take place? We've intentionally tried to keep the number of items that we have really small so that you can complete it quickly. We know staff leading activities are short on time, and we've made these just simple yes or no items. There are 3 items that you would note about things that were done before the activity to set it up for success. There are, I'm counting while I read, 6 items that reflect things that were done during the activity. And then even things that you do after the activity are associated with the level of interaction, especially if you're doing this programming repeatedly. All of these items here, for example, time being set aside for facilitators to plan the activity, designing the activity to reflect what you know about the participants' culture, their experiences, their interests, and their languages. These have all been associated with higher levels of intergenerational interaction. We have also got in the manual, you've got available to you, a guide that will walk you through what each of these items looks like. So if there's some language here that isn't so familiar, or it's a practice that you haven't used very often, you can find those directions in there. The next page of the iPad is just a couple of items. And this is the part that gets at what was the level of interaction between the young people and the older adults. And so item number 13 there reflects an observation scale. This is for the youth. And it follows is an indicator for the adults. We want to recognize that a good intergenerational program is going to support engagement for the young people and the older adults. We wouldn't want to see that only the children were highly watching and engaged, and the older adults were all doing solitary behavior. That tells us something was not quite right in how we planned this. Now, there are limitations to these 2 items. It does ask you to represent all the children on average and all the adults on average. But remember, our goal is also to make this short and simple to complete. If somebody really wanted to, they could fill this out for each of the youth and older adult participants. And then item 14 simply gets at the mood. We know that sometimes young children and older adults can be pretty compliant and will go along with what we ask them to do. I know we have participants from Adult Day Services on this webinar. That's a group I have a lot of experience with. They are often quite compliant and will do what staff are asking them to do. It might not be their favorite thing. And so we want to look at their expression of affect as well. Does this look like something they're enjoying or not? Now, this instrument could stand by itself, and you could see, do things that you do on the best practices, those yes/no items, does completing more of those or specific items correlate with the level of intergenerational interaction? You could use just that, and it could be helpful. We've heard from some folks that they don't feel like they need to fill this scale out every single time they do an activity. If you do intergenerational 5 days a week, that might be a lot more paperwork than your staff feel like they can benefit from or have the time from. And so you might consider, for example, using this instrument when you have a new staff member or volunteer who starts implementing the programming. Or if you see a dip in interest or participation from the youth or older adults, you might pull this out and see if you can figure out why by looking at the practices and the participants' responses. Or if you introduce a new type of content, that could be a good time to pull this out. Also within the Intergenerational Program Evaluation Tool, and I know I'm running short on time, so I'll address these briefly. There is a document to help people get started who may not have much experience with evaluation. And this is the idea that even if you are not a professional evaluator, you have some goals in mind for your youth and older adult participants, and you can note progress towards reaching those goals. So we have a sample sheet here that you could fill out, and below that are even some sample developmental goals or relational goals you might look to pursue with your intergenerational programming. And I have a sample here, again, referencing my adult day services and preschool participants I have experience with. If they were doing gardening together, you might have interest in the young children developing their motor skills, the older adults working on their motor skills as well, and you would have room to consider how are they progressing with those goals that you set. These are useful tools for you also. If we have some professional evaluators or researchers in the group, and I'm going to make sure that this is my last slide. Also at that intergenerational scale is this table. So you don't have to try and read it now. I worked really hard to curate valid, reliable measures that have been used in the intergenerational literature. And so they are available through the Generations United website. And you can find either a print-friendly version of the instrument or a link to access the instrument. Also provided at the pages are information about how the scale was used, what the indicators of reliability and validity are, and some information that would give you confidence that either you could pick up this instrument or that you would want to work with somebody with some specialized training. So I am going to thank you for your time. I'm also going to encourage you to check out the Journal of Intergenerational Relationships. I'm the editor for that publication, and we welcome a range of different types of presentations of your work. I thank you for your time and look forward to hearing from my colleagues.
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon. And now we're going to turn it over to Betty at LINKages. I think you're muted, Betty. There we go. No.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
I can hear you now. Thank
sorry.
you.
I was going to say, I'm so pleased to have received this invitation and tell you all about LINKages. We used to say we are the best kept secret in Calgary, but thank goodness we can't say that anymore because we don't want to be a secret. First of all, let me tell you about LINKages' vision. Our vision is for strong and vibrant communities where youth and seniors thrive. So we've been around 29 years. We have long-term, our goal is long-term intergenerational programs and friendships, and we focus on teenagers and seniors. Our flagship program is where we took school students, junior high and high school, into care centers and had programs like that. So the programs that we have at LINKages, and I've only been here 8 years, but all of the programs I'm going to tell you about have happened in the last 29 years, including all of these in the last 8. So care centers and schools, we still have those. Community centers, where the schools go into community halls or community centers. Also our university students go to seniors buildings that are designed for low-income seniors. We have a chapter at the University of Calgary. We have a program called Project Inspire, and that is art-based. We also had a Music to Link program that provided music and art activities for people living with dementia. We had projects in rural Alberta. We also had Story or Performance of Your Life. I wish I had time to tell you about each program individually because they're all amazing. And during COVID, we all had to pivot. And so our programs, they turned into the top 3 here. We had activity buddies, we had pen pals and phone pals. And then since COVID, we've been able to go back in person. And we've added opera buddies, IG outreach, where the students or youth over the age of 18 go to visit isolated seniors in their homes or at a care center. And also we turned a lot of our programs into linkages clubs where either the liaisons at the care centers or the community centers and the teachers, they run these clubs, or if there's high schools involved, we have a leadership team at the high school that we train, and then they run the clubs. And we used to have rural programs across Alberta, and then that evolved into an intergenerational community of practice to provide a no-cost option for anybody in Alberta interested in intergenerational programs. And this is actually hosted on Core Alberta. We have, in this community of practice, we have regular events. They're all on Zoom, of course. We have conversation cafes, collaborative and continuous learning for anybody and everybody who comes. They exchange knowledge. We have diverse perspectives from different areas and different initiatives. Also, it's a great opportunity for networking. Barbara said that they just started a community of practice, IG community of practice on Core Canada. And so the one in Alberta is pretty amazing. And I'm looking forward to the one Canada-wide to share all the different perspectives. And also it's great for intergenerational dialogue. And then Linkages is growing. I said, we're no longer the best kept secret in Calgary. We are on the national committee that promotes National Intergenerational Day, which is actually in 2 days, June 1st. You're probably aware of that. We're also the Canadian lead for Global Intergenerational Week, which happens every year on the last week of April. And then I'm on the National Advisory Council for Grandpals, and you are going to hear from Jules in a few minutes, and she'll tell you all about that. And also I'm a tutor for the ISIP course. ISIP is Intergenerational Certificate of Intergenerational Practice. And this is offered by Generations Working Together in Scotland. And then we have a department that does intergenerational training. It began in the early 2000s in rural areas of Alberta, but now it's not just in Alberta, it's expanded nationally and internationally. And the services, it's a fee-for-service options that we provide are intergenerational program development, sensitivity training for youth and seniors, and that's what I'll be doing in North Shore, Vancouver on June 12th, and I'm really excited about that. Also, curriculum development, facilitator and coordinator training, customized training, coaching, and consulting. Now, I have hundreds of stories to share with you, but I only have time for one. So let me tell you about Anna and her girls. Anna she was a resident at one of our care centers, and Alyssa and Mickey were matched with her, and they were friends. Every Friday after school, first of all, the girls started in grade 11. Every Friday after school, they would join the program over at the care center, and they spent an hour with Anna. And then when they're in grade 12, they came back to the program and they were matched up with Anna again. And they had such a wonderful bond. I remember whenever they left, when the program was finished, the front door was beside a huge common area that had windows. And so they would wheel Anna in her wheelchair to the windows so that when they left, they would walk down the sidewalk and turn around and they would wave at Anna and Anna would wave at them. And then a staff member would come and take Anna back to her room or dining room, wherever she was going. Well, when the girls were in grade 12, in March, we found out that Anna was going to be moving to another care center. And usually if one of the residents moved, then we would provide another resident for the students. But Alyssa and Mickey came and they said, you know what, Anna's moving to another care center. Can we just not come to this program anymore, but can we continue to visit her at her new care center? And it was convenient because it wasn't that far away. And I said, of course, that would be wonderful, but just keep me updated and let me know how it's going, which they did. Well, wouldn't you know it? 3 months after Anna moved, she passed away. And wasn't it wonderful that Alyssa and Mickey could help her adapt to her new care center and could be that consistent visit that she received every week? So after she passed away, the girls created a slideshow with music and they sent it to me. So I am going to end my presentation with this video and I hope you enjoy it. I know you will. Grab your Kleenex.
I will stay with you. We'll make it to the other side like lovers do. 'Cause I'm not giving up, no, not yet. Even when I'm down on my last breath, even when they say there's nothing left. So don't give up on. I'm not giving up, no, not me. Even when nobody else believes, I'm not going down that easily. So don't give up on me.
Wow, thank you, Betty. That really was very moving. And now we're going to go to Jules, who is going to talk about Grandpals.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Betty. It's always great to learn more about the programs you're running. Hi, everyone. I'm Jules Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to share a little bit about Grandpals. So Grandpals is an intergenerational program, and it connects typically elementary school age students, and it connects them with older adults for regular programming throughout the school year. So our vision, getting into it, is to build a world of deeper intergenerational learning, connections, and storytelling. And I love the video that Betty shared with Anna and her girls, because it just speaks to the power of friendship and having a connection between generations. And one of the big things that this program, in particular Grandpals, revolves around is that element of storytelling. There's so many rich experiences that each person has to bring to the table. And what Grandpals does is create that space and hold that space so that folks can come together and share their experiences, their learnings, connect with one another, and just spend time to build those deeper connections. And so our vision is to create that world where generations can come together. And so it's wonderful that you're all here today to learn more or contribute to this conversation around intergenerational programming, because there are so many beautiful benefits to it. So a little bit more about this program in particular is that for the most part, it's run in person. So Betty did mention that you're going to see this trend, especially through the pandemic, where there were times where the programming wasn't able to run in person. And so we moved to an online mode. And I'm sure the folks who will follow will talk a little bit about that as well. But for the most part, we encourage organizations and schools that run the Grandpals program to do it in person where possible and where safe. So what this looks like in reality is that Grandpals, usually a group of 10 or so older adults who are equipped to become Grandpals, meet with students or children, depending on the environment they're meeting in. And they meet on a regular basis to share different stories and do different activities together to draw out different learnings. And we focus on a different theme each session. So whether it's talking about home or adventures or technology is a really cool one, getting to hear different perspectives on technology and how that influences your worldview and how you interact with people. So you'll see a few photos here of the program and what it looks like. Sometimes it's in the classroom, sometimes the classroom brings it to a library. We've also had scenarios where an organization is actually a public library that hosts an after-school program that brings older adults together with younger students to learn from one another. And I'll share a little quote with you. Our program, I should mention, is being run in different communities around Canada. So currently it's being run in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, and in Ontario in different sites. And the Grandpals program that's running at Baycrest, which is located in Toronto, one of the Grandpals had shared a little tidbit about their experience, and it made me smile. So hopefully it does the same for you. She had shared that I find I can't remember what my day-to-day life was like when I was 11 years old. I'm 97. Sure, there was school, friends, homework, chores, and you name it. It is nice to be reminded of how growing up is still so similar, even though we are many, many years apart. And I love that quote because it draws out that similarity and the connection that folks can have, regardless of what generation you grew up in. And Grandpals program really focuses on bringing people together to break down barriers and to redefine any notion that folks have that may limit people's abilities or because of the age that they see in the other person. So that's a big focus, is that we're addressing ageism through our programs. The other element about our program is it is a project-based learning opportunity. So I did mention it's run in schools as well as public libraries. And for the most part, it is curriculum-based. So it is incredibly connected to the curriculum expectations that teachers need to meet. And it's just a really fun and engaging way for students to engage in the material that they need to learn, while doing it through forming these really wonderful connections with different generations. So there's a few examples you'll see on the screen here of some of those creative projects. Some of them are arts-based, which you see here. Sometimes students write stories that they hear and they learn from their grandpal. We've seen poetry being written, interpretive dances, songs written for and about their grandpals and the lessons they learned from their grandpals. And another, I just met with our community practice last week, so my mind is buzzing with all these wonderful stories from folks. So I'll share one more before I turn the mic over, and it's from an educator in Erickson, Manitoba, and they shared with me the other week that she was most impressed with one of her students who generally has a negative attitude about school in general. She shared that he was not excited about what we were doing in school in general. And he was not interested in, he wasn't really interested when he actually met with his grandpal for the first time. But then as the weeks continued on, and by the third session, he was pretty much, he was begging for more grandpal time and couldn't believe it was time for recess at certain points. And she mentioned that at one point he turned to her and said, "This is way better than doing ELA because it's so fun and we actually get to do stuff." And the teacher responded, "Well, he still, well, he shouldn't respond, sorry." She shared, he still doesn't believe his, believe me, that he actually is doing English language arts. And the whole time through preparing for and participating in the authentic conversations he's having with his group. She mentioned that he's really excited about his idea of decorating a flower pot for his grandpa as his final project. And she doesn't want to break it to him that doing that would be considered art because he doesn't like art either. Grandpals has really made a difference in our classroom, is what she shared with me. So I think the beautiful thing about intergenerational programming is that it can really connect with students who might not be engaged in the classroom or the curriculum. But when you bring in a caring older adult into that classroom, they start to see it in a different way. And vice versa, with the older adult, it's such a beautiful way to share their lived experiences with younger generations. And I'll just share this, a brief little tidbit of information that's shared through this global report on ageism. I think this came out maybe a year or two ago. It was written by the World Health Organization and their member states in this global strategy to address ageism. And what I found really fascinating is that globally, 1 in 2 people are ageist against older people. And so for older people, ageism is associated with a shorter lifespan, or physical and mental health, slower recovery from disability, cognitive decline. The impacts of ageism reduces older people's quality of life, increases their social isolation and loneliness, which both are associated with serious health problems. So I'm sharing that because as I had shared a little tidbits and stories from the program, these stories of impact of how it's bringing people together and you feel connected can have such huge impacts on individuals' lives that sometimes we don't necessarily see or hear about all the time. So it's a great report. You could check it out if you're interested. And it really speaks to all the benefits of intergenerational programs. So if you are considering it and starting one or getting involved with any of the programs that you'll hear about today or any others, I couldn't encourage you enough to do so. InterGen programs are responsive to community requirements. They build connections and stronger communities, and they're incredibly effective at diminishing ageist attitudes. So just because I realize I don't want to take up too much time, this little snapshot of how the Grandpals program works. And it's just, for us, it's really important to have that co-creation piece so that it does reflect the needs of the community. And if you're interested in getting involved with Grandpals, feel free to reach out to me. My email is there and I can put it in the chat after. But thanks again for your time and for listening.
Great, thank you, Jules. And now we're going to turn it over to Sue and June, and you'll hear about InterGen North Shore.
Great, thank you. I'll just work on getting my screen up here for a second. There we go. Great. Well, so can everyone see it? You're good?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, we are grateful to be here today, June and myself, and to have this opportunity to share a little bit about the InterGen North Shore project. And we're going to share about what the project is, how it came to be, what we've done so far, and where we're going. So come enjoy the ride with us. If we go, there we go. So today we have representing myself and June is a community volunteer champion that had a vision and pulled a bunch of people around her that shared a joy and an interest and a vision in this work. And one of the people was me. And I think my passion is to see community come together and really connect in life-giving ways that are just great back and forth relationship. My background has been in dietetics and seniors, and I've worked in stroke recovery, and now I'm involved in lots of seniors and community engagement programs. And I'm going to let June introduce herself.
Hello, and thank you for this opportunity today. It's great, and it was wonderful to hear about linkages and Grandpals. I can't add much more to the introduction that Barb read out and what Sue has already said, but I am a retired early childhood educator, and I've had some very impactful intergenerational experiences over my years in work with children and social services. And so just really dreamt about a vision of intergenerational programming really being promoted and facilitated throughout our community here. So InterGenNS, we'll move on to our vision here was to see something that was community-wide. And when we launched in July of 2019, we just sent out the idea to about 30 different community agencies, our 3 municipalities on the North Shore, school districts, the health department. And the only really offshore connections were, one was the BC Council for Families, who are province-wide and have certainly been a great partner for us in our training, including the one coming up on the 12th with Betty Good, and Simon Fraser University, the Department of Gerontology. And when we first launched the idea in July of 2019, we sent it out to about 30 contacts, and lo and behold, had a brainstorming session that fall, and 20 of them showed up, including the Department of Gerontology from Simon Fraser University and BC Council for Families. And from there, we struck a steering committee, and the vision really was to see community engaged development of intergenerational programming, but we thought it would be great to have an academic partnership, if that could happen, to just investigate best practices as well as invigorate the development on the North Shore. And so we did partner with Simon Fraser University, and it looked like we were going to be able to have an academic and community partnership, but we needed some matching funding. And I will, sorry, I've just go back to the definition, thanks, Sue. So right from the very beginning, we wanted to have a very broad term of what intergenerational meant. We wanted to go beyond the idea of purpose programs to any kind of opportunity or interaction or event or public space, or as somebody has called it, a community living room that may foster those interactions in the community between generations. And we also wanted to go beyond youth and seniors or children and seniors to really try and embrace people that are often underrepresented in these activities, such as maybe newcomers to our community, or people with varying abilities, or people that are sometimes marginalized or isolated in the community. So we were able to meet with Simon Fraser University, coming from our community table. And it looked like we were going to be able to have joint academic and community funding. And we met with them on March the 4th of 2020. And I don't have to tell you what happened on March the 17th of 2020, because that was the lockdown. And even though community funding seemed very, very possible on March the 4th, everybody sort of locked down funding as well as of March 17th, because they didn't know what this was going to mean. But we did have an incredible champion in Dr. Chaudhry, from the Department of Gerontology, and he had already lined up Rochelle Patil as a possible master's student for a project. And he determinedly found some research funding that didn't need a community match. And we were able to start with that with CERI, the Community Engaged Research Initiative funding. And that was we were able to begin our academic research. So even though the community was locked down, we were not. We were able to start with that research. And what Rochelle did was get the community input through detailed interviews and in-depth interviews with community providers, as well as matching that with phase 1 of our research, which was BC and Canadian best practice. And then she went on to, there's further slides on this that we don't have to expand on, but we went on to a phase 2 of looking at programs that do focus on marginalized participants. And then phase 3 was international best practice, but every phase had a community part to it where we did in-depth interviews. So from our large community table, which is now has grown to now we're well over 30 participants, we picked the steering committee, which of 8 or 10 people, which has motivated us to go forward. And we're now into more direct community engagement, which Sue will go on to talk about.
Yeah, so I think Rochelle is here today, and we're going to share a few of her slides that outline the research that has been done. And we're moving on into this new phase. So just I'm going to whip over a little bit of that, and you can have a copy of the slides. But so really our project is about community engaged research, community organizations, and community members working together to design and develop something that can infuse connection in our community. So June referred to the 3 phases. So the first time we did sort of interviews in our community and some of the background literature, what's available in Canada. And then we moved on to sort of more structured interviews on the North Shore and started to collect, Rochelle really did this, started to collect helpful tools and resources that we could start to benefit from across our community. And so then in the 3rd phase, we thought, it'd be interesting to know what's happening in the world, some really successful intergenerational opportunities. So Rochelle did a bit of study on that. And at that same time, we wanted to bring that educational piece down to the ground in the community. And we started with a little bit of an intergen coordinator, because our goal was to find out, how do we collate and get these resources? We have all this educational background. How do we develop a program directory of what is, so people can say, I'm interested, how do I find out? Because they're all happening in small pockets across the North Shore. So those things have been created now, and you'll get a copy of the slides, but it shows our website, and we do have a program directory of the humble beginnings of what we have so far. And I'm sure there are more that are not in it. And we have a resource hub of all of the information developed through our community engaged research. And then we started a newsletter that tells some of the stories and shares some of the resources of what's happening in the community. And so these slides I will include, but some of the great research done, we're looking at the key social forces at play, some of the role that COVID played in stimulating the work that needed to be done. It was pre-existing, but it really highlighted it. We talk a lot about ageism and what that means, and how we can work together to mitigate that and to change how we think and to be inspired by people of different ages. Some of the types of programs that were happening that Rochelle looked at, some of the types of activities that are happening that we'd love to see happen in our community. What were the participant demographics? Who's underrepresented? What do we need to think about in terms of including people? Some of the outcomes, which I think you guys could speak to clearly in your other programs, of what happens for older adults. and also the outcomes for younger adults as well. And then together, what are some of the mutual benefits that are being seen across the world in the programs that are being done? We want them in our community as well. So some of the challenges we just wanted to look at, so we're aware of what are some of the barriers and things that we need to address as we go forward. And some of the factors that we need to promote. Fabulous to have your information on evaluation, Shannon. I can't wait to dig into that a little bit more. And some of the opportunities for growth. So all of those you can have a closer look at. But now, where are we? So we've kind of finished that community engaged research stage. All the way along, we've been sharing the research and the information with this community table and growing and trying to bring as many people along for the ride and the joy of thinking about what they can do through their organization. So this was a little picture of celebration at the end of the research. And if you look really close, you might be able to see we represent many different ages there. And it was not lost on us that our intergenerational committee represented just the way it happened. We were very different in ages, and we were able to really share and enjoy different perspectives as we did this. And now our dream was to increase our ability to have an intergenerational facilitator on the ground who can start to link people together. Great, you've got a school class, you've got this, we've got that. How can we breathe life in and build new opportunities? So we just received some funding, which we're very excited about through Spark, and we have a little bit of gaming funding, and we're putting it together and going to have InterGen coordinators 2 days a week. And we hope to increase that as funding is available. As mentioned, we're also super excited to have Betty Good coming and teaching us and doing the sensitivity train the trainer workshop for us. And then we have just hired 2 folks within North Shore Community Resources, Caitlin Swale and Yola Switzkowski, and both of them bring a fabulous passion for this work. Already, Caitlin is working on Connect and Prepare, which works with residents in local apartment buildings, building connections. And as well, she's working on an emergency preparedness, very practical resources and presentations across the North Shore for seniors. And her background is a master's in counseling. She wanted to do her master's in InterGen, and there really wasn't much out there at the time. So we're excited for all that's rolling now. And Yola is involved in social prescribing through our organization and goes out and helps to build practical plans to engage seniors all across the community. So she's looking forward to rolling up her sleeves and being involved in digging into the community in this way as well. And a few of the things they'll be doing, promoting and stimulating new programs. It's fun to hear about all the other programs like Grandpals. We dream of having one here as well. They're going to look at growing and maintaining the intergenerational resource hub that we have. And we hope to really grow a program directory. We are community resources, and we have lots of seniors directories, child and family. And we dream of having something for people when they come forward to go, my mom would love to be involved in something, and we have opportunities to connect people to. We want to continue to share the stories through the newsletter, which is also a great way of building and stimulating what's happening. And we will start to convene our North Shore community of practice. And we're happy to have organizations like the BC Council for Families, the training that LINKages is doing, to start to guide and direct us in our development. And I know for myself, just a quick story about a young person that was working in, there was a group of young people working in long-term care homes. And one young person studied the bit of the background of what this individual liked. And she was partnered with a woman there, and she realized that in her background, she loves dogs. And this woman had been nonverbal for a long, long time. And she brought in the dog, and the woman sat with the dog for an hour. And when we had to finish, when she had to finish and take the dog back, the woman who had been nonverbal for years said, "Don't take the dog. And it was such a beautiful connection moment. She knew what was going on and she knew what she loved. And all of those things are part of how we build connection. And I think one other quick story where there was a guy wearing a ball cap in this event, and an older gentleman behind was really ticked that this kid would be wearing his ball cap. He's actually a young adult, and that was his main focus. How do we get this person to take their hat off and have some respect? And then over time, he got to know this young guy who did youth work, and it was amazing. You talk about ageism, how that transformed his heart and his relationship with this young guy, and the kind of things that they engaged in together to support young youth in the community. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Listen, Sue, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A if you are able, because we've run out of time, but if you're able to answer those questions in the Q&A box. I think previous questions that were asked there have now been answered there, but clearly we did not give enough time for this session. But thank you, Sue and June and Jules and Betty and Shannon. And I would invite everybody to continue this conversation. We have a group set up on Core Canada, and I'm just going to quickly show it to you. I did put the address in the chat box, and you will be able to find it there. I'm sorry. And you have to join Core in order to participate in a group, but it's a very simple thing to do. And as Betty mentioned, the group on Core, the community of practice on intergenerational programs in Core Alberta, is super active, and we'd love to be able to replicate the same thing on Core Canada. There's already a lot of resources uploaded. If you know about resources or if you're involved in a program, go over there and get the information and upload your resources, share a story or information about your program, and continue the conversation. So again, thank you, Shannon, Betty, Jules, Sue, and June. I learned so much from your presentations, really appreciate it. And the stories were really inspiring. And so I do hope that everyone will continue the conversations on Core. Thank you also to Ravi, who runs everything behind the scenes and makes this work, and to my colleague Laura, who set up the webinar. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to join the webinar and to ask questions and share your comments. And hopefully we will see you in the group on Core, and have a great rest of the day. There are lots of comments in the chat box if you're having a chance to take a look at them. And Sue, were you able to get those questions answered in the Q&A?
Can someone copy me and send me the question?
Ravi, are you able to do that?
Yes, I can send it over.
Great. Yeah, but how do we get it to the, maybe we put it in the on the Core group, because they're both from an anonymous attendee.
Okay.
So we don't know who to send them
I'm
to.
just looking back to find the questions. Can you read it to me, Ravi?
Yeah. Can the global scan on intergenerational opportunities that was completed be shared? And where do you see the program directory being housed? Online? Call into a phone number.
Oh, and is there a phone number?
No, that's the question. Call into a phone number, question mark.
Where do we see the directory being held online? And can you call into a phone number?
Yeah.
I think they're wondering, like, how is it housed? Is it like a general number, like you call 211 and then you can get info? So is it a phone number or is it a website? That's how I'm interpreting the question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't
Okay.
write it, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, that clarifies it. So in our slides, there's links there to where the directory is, where the resource hub is, which has the global scan and that kind of thing. So hopefully they'll be able to get a better look at those when they get